Good morning, welcome back. This is Morning Prime. We have a full house now, but before I unveil the house and the round table, let's take a look at the soapbox for this particular day. Let's take a look at the current affairs all in one.
"34 days are still going." Unhappy medics held peaceful march on the streets of Nairobi, defying Inspector General of Police Japheth Koome, who had outlawed the protest. The doctors maintained their hard stance of not going back to work.
All right, we will give you that soapbox as it comes very shortly. But for now, allow me to also appreciate some very key intellectuals in the House. It is important that we follow closely what is happening in the globe, because they say that we are interdependent, but that does not mean we should be captives of any particular region. But how does that play out? Remember, we have started by speaking about the Sudan conflict and the role of Kenya in that particular, resolution process, the role of the African Union, and different perceptions were shared right here on this table. But remember to also send in your feedback at KTN News across all the social media platforms. I'm now told the soapbox is ready. So before we get into the conversation, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, the soapbox this morning.
I never think that I would really experience war. All these bombs, which I really witnessed.
I've always wanted to help. There's so many people in need. It's where do you start? And I've always donated money to charity, but you don't get the same sense of satisfaction just writing a check, to an organization. You never see where it goes. You never interact with the people that you're helping. And so this has been a really rewarding experience for me.
I cannot abandon them, especially when they rely on my support. Thus, I remain to ensure that injured individuals have access to essentials like food, shelter, and medical care. Leaving would only exacerbate the situation for those in need.
Sadly, I don't see this conflict as particularly ripe for any kind of resolution right now. Both sides think either that they can win or they have to win. And as long as they continue to be sustained by external actors, providing them weapons and intelligence, then they're going to continue this fight.
We have an opportunity here to establish a strategic alliance against this serious threat from Iran, which threatens to put nuclear explosives on the heads of these missiles. This thing could be a very serious threat. The U.S., Israel, and its allies stand shoulder to shoulder to defend against this threat.
And I think what this weekend demonstrated is that Israel did not have to and does not have to defend itself alone when it is the victim of an aggression, the victim of an attack. In the 36 hours since, we have been coordinating a diplomatic response to seek to prevent escalation. Strength and wisdom need to be the same sides, the different sides of the same coin.
We call on all parties for self-restraint and respect the rules and also international norms that we set.
No one is going to give up. People are still defiant, and people are defiant about defending their country. And the polls show that a lot of Ukrainians, the prevailing majority of Ukrainians, are not ready to give up an inch of territory for any compromises that might be there on the table.
Now, there are so many voices all over the world speaking to what the globe should look like, speaking on, different lives and what is happening across board. And, at the end of the day, we make part of this globe as a country. And there's so many other cases like the, Ukraine war, Russia, that affected Kenya. We, even in the past years, followed Afghanistan issues, etc. DRC, looking at, the genocide in Rwanda. So conflict can really then disorient other parts of the world. I want to appreciate and also acknowledge the presence of one of our panelists, Honorable Farah Malim, who is Member of Parliament, the DAB. Mheshimiwa, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You're just watching the soapbox and reading news today. What would be your opening remarks to the state of the globe?
You see, the world, or so-called developed world, has selected to go into selective amnesia. Basically, it's like saying when Hitler was gassing the Jews, we have to negotiate both sides. The Jews are resisting to be killed, and Hitler wants to kill them. We have to come to some kind of a middle ground. I mean, he is a genocide, an open, outright, serious impunity in which all the global, most powerful countries in the world have come together. The US, the UK, the Germans, everybody, the whole West has come together to support one of the most powerful countries in the world, which is a nuclear state, against innocent civilians who are being killed in their thousands on a daily basis. And then they say, let's not escalate. Israel chooses to go and bomb Iran. Iran retaliates as a defensive mechanism. Oh, there has to be sanctions against Iran. The whole world has come together. Iran is the devil. No, you are the devil. The Jews and the Zionists control the world. I mean, that's now have become an open secret. Exactly the way it was after the First World War, and how Hitler felt that he lost the First World War because the Zionists had traded Balfour Declaration for the loss of what you call and sided with the Allies those days. And then that's how he ended up saying that let me come with a final solution. Now, when you think, if you think you're so special that I don't matter, that you can kill me and there's nothing wrong, your faith tells you you can kill, you can rob, you can maim, you can do all sorts of things. I'm a subhuman. You are the chosen people of God. You can kill anybody. And when we are Africans, when their own Semitic race enjoys that kind of, I mean, it's supposed to be treated that way. What do you think is going to be the treatment for blacks? You get my point? So Iran has a right to acquire nuclear. You get my point? It has a right to acquire any means in which they will protect their dignity. It has a right to respond in the manner it has to respond. Let me tell you one thing. Because your nuclear day is the day you're going to be killed. I mean, for nuclear proliferation or for peace, for the young boys and girls who died in Gaza, peace has ended. They died. You see what I mean? I mean, nobody can come to you right now and say, oh, we can sacrifice the whole of Kenya. You know, these are black people. After all, they were slaves and subhumans and the rest of it. I'm just saying. And let's have the rest of the world working in order. The Arab regimes in the Middle East are all going to lose. There's going to be a popular revolution against them. All those Gulf states are going to lose. Blinken is a Jew. He's a Zionist himself. Richard Sunak is there because of the Jewish lobby and the money of the Jews. You know what I mean? In UK. If you say one small thing that the Jews are called anti-Semite. No, I want to kill these people. They're innocents, but then they're children, but it doesn't matter. They'll grow up to become terrorists later on. And you say that's wrong, you know what they'll say? Let me just finish.
Yes.
If you say that's wrong, oh, he's anti-Semite. God, where was the anti-Kikuyu when the Mau were being killed, were being destroyed, the way were being destroyed? Where is the anti-Somali when Americans came and literally killed 700 people in one day in Mogadishu? Where is the anti-black when we are being enslaved, the manner in which we are being enslaved? 75 million of us being shackled out there. And by the way, the middlemen and the traders were all Jews. Majority of the middlemen and traders who are basically dealing with that were Jews.
Now, gentlemen, I just want us to pick from there. In fact, now let's talk about the Israel-Iran, conflict before we even get into the, the AU, because President William Ruto, spoke on this matter, and Kenya's President William Ruto and his South African counterpart Cyril Ramaphosa, at that time, took a reconciliatory tone as they cautioned that the latest skirmishes in the Gulf are a threat to security and peace globally, as the act could escalate to a full war if not checked. I don't know what your take is, Nelson, even after hearing what Honorable Malim has put across on this particular Iran-Israel conflict.
The matter of Iran-Israel will definitely affect actually the whole world if it escalates. I've heard the minister, the head of military for Israel saying, we have received whatever Iran has done, but we are going to respond definitely. And there are options. From what I'm reading, they're saying we can bomb the oil installations, we can look at the air or nuclear. Like Meshmo says, Iran has the right to do anything to protect itself.
In retaliation?
Not necessarily retaliation. I mean, you must be ready for anything. Even if there was nothing from Israel today, Iran should be ready for anything. Every country has a defense.
Right to defend itself.
If you must defend, you have to defend yourself. So if Israel goes ahead and makes a heavy retaliation to Iran, I think there will be more to lose, in my opinion, than Iran.
Okay.
Because even the weapon system of Iran, you know, Israel is a very small country, and largely it is because of few powers that have brought Israel together. It's not, it cannot be independently said Israel is a very powerful country. It's not. The Arabs have more say, even economically. In fact, I just found out that the richest people are not even mentioned in the world. They are Arabs. People who have resources.
Yeah.
They are not the Elon
Not the Bill
Musk,
Gates, yeah, not the
Bill Gates, no.
the Zuckerman, yeah.
They are people who have resources. And if Iran decides to go full-blown with Israel, we are going to be affected, definitely. Look at the oil, the crude oil installations for Iran. And largely the Middle East, Israel has very little resources that they can use. They only have technology, which is largely borrowed from Russia,
the US.
And the US. So, in my opinion, I think Israel must be treading on a very dangerous ground if they decide to go full-blown into war.
Because even as I'm looking at these reports, gentlemen, so far on Sunday, according to this daily, the UN Security Council held an emergency meeting following the Iranian attack, where Israel pressed for new sanctions against Tehran, and Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned the region was on the brink of war. Professor Kagwanja, I mean, there's a leader once who hinted at possible World War III. We don't want to hope for that.
No, I want to complicate the matter a little bit.
Okay.
That this is very deliberate, attempt to push the world into some form of perennial instability as part of where America's buying time to stabilize its own backyard. I read.
So you feel there's a hand from the West?
Not only that, I read voluminously all the writings that are done in the global from that perspective. Remember, America was holding the sway during the Cold War because they could use the Cold War as an excuse for anything. You could use the Cold War to demonize the Palestinians and basically see them as terrorists. You could use the Cold War for anything. So when that ended in 1990s, the America was left naked. And therefore, with the rise of China, the resurgence of Russia, and the emergence of middle powers in the Middle East, particularly Iran, Saudi Arabia, and others, the trend that we have begun to see is America's attempt to polarize the world into what they are calling the authoritarian regimes and democratic regimes. And therefore, when you look at the wars that we are talking about, that's stabilizing the world, now they carry that crack, and they cannot be by mistake. Look at this. Iran versus Israel. Israel is supposed to be on the democratic side of things. Iran is supposed to be on the authoritarian side of things. Russia and Ukraine. Russia is supposed to be on the authoritarian side. Ukraine is the bastion of democracy.
The good people.
They're good. Now, China and Taiwan. Taiwan is supposed to be very good. As a victim, China is supposed to be very bad. Let's move on. Then Hamas, Israelis. Hamas is supposed to be very bad. Israel is supposed to be very good. It cannot be a coincidence that the way the books in the West are defining the good and the bad is the way the wars in the world are taking. There must be some hidden hand behind these kind of wars. And when you begin to see the world, we are seeing the recreation, the revamping of NATO.
Okay.
Yes, and
expansion
an expansion of NATO into territories that it had never occupied before, and talking of conflict in non-NATO zones.
Yes.
So that the wars we are now beginning to see are not in the NATO zone; they are outside the NATO zone. So what's the big point? In order to come back to the peace in the world, now we have to cultivate a degree of tolerance of other civilizations. we have to say what Mheshimiwa is saying here, that all men are created equal.
Absolutely.
And there are no men who are created more equal than others. And therefore, we need to talk about the oneness of humanity, not the polarization of humanity into the good ones and the bad ones, because that's what the Cold War left to us. The Cold War was about who thinks communist, who doesn't think communist. And therefore, you use that as an excuse to create an us versus them. And that us versus them is the danger that we are facing in the world today. And therefore, we go back to, and I keep on referring to this because it is the declaration of war that was never noticed by many. October 2022, America issues the National Security Strategy. And in it, in the preface to that, Joe Biden basically polarizes the world into two and says that this decade is a do or die decade. And he says in his forward, it is online. It is not something that you cannot access. It's not classified.
Okay.
In that unclassified document, he says that we are going to go after China because it has the capacity, the economy, the diplomatic muscle to replace us. And we're going to degrade Russia because it has also the capacity to destabilize the European region, which we are allies. And we'll also have to deal with these other nonsensical forces that are in this, or Iran as one of the cases, and so on.
Hamas,
so yes, Hamas. So it is already in writing. The declaration of war is in writing.
Okay.
So what are we talking about here? We need to tell the Americans, we need to tell the leaders of NATO that we need a peaceful world. And please, it is incumbent upon you to stabilize the world by basically withdrawing that declaration of war.
All right, it's interesting because looking at the paper that I want to hear from Professor Macharia, on the Israel to press on in Gaza after Iran attack, not that you mentioned the US president. What we have here is that in a joint statement, G7, of course, G7 leaders emphasized the need to avoid further escalation, calling on the parties to refrain from actions aimed at, of course, increasing the tension in the area. And what we are having is that Israel's top ally, according to this paper, the United States also urged caution and calm. And if I just if I quote what the White House National Security Council spokesperson Joe Kirby told NBC, he said, "We don't want to see this escalate." And after the attack, US President Joe Biden reaffirmed Washington's ironclad support for Israel, but a senior U.S. official said the president had also told Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that Washington would not offer military support for any retaliation on Iran. That's the information we have here. So, Professor, picking it from there, U.S. seems to be distancing itself and saying, please have calm.
Yeah, it seems so. See, there are many things to this development. One, there is domestic politics to be played. Biden is in a lot of trouble politically at home. He needs diversion. Netanyahu is also in a lot of trouble at home. They need some diversion, mainly diversion from Gaza. And what appears to have happened, the Israeli attack on the Iranians through the embassy was one way of the Iranians appear to have been very careful. From the time the Gaza thing started, they have been provoked suggestions that they are there. And they appear to be very careful not to fall into the trap. Now the attack on the embassy appears to have gone a little far. So they retaliated, and the question is, are they ready for whatever the Israelis and the Americans, because they work together. So for Biden to say they're not going to give any arms, they've already given arms, they are there. So it's not something new. So it's good. So the question, was this part of the diversion? In the same way that the so-called Hamas attack in October last year was seemingly a diversion from domestic challenges. Netanyahu was in a lot of mess. He's been accused of criminality. There are demonstrations. You know, his family is supposedly involved in some shady deals, and people demanding that he gets out. And we have information that the Hamas attack was not that a surprise. It was known.
Okay.
You know, given the claim that Netanyahu himself had been helping the Hamas to grow in order to undermine the Palestinian Authority. So there are a lot of awkward things that come into that. So the whole thing, this could have been a diversion from domestic challenges, both in Israel and in the United States. And adding something to something that Kagwanja talked about. You know, sometimes historians like to remember a few things, like the feud, the conflict between Rome and Carthage. And in that feud, Rome won 2 big ones. But it was never satisfied because Carthage was there. And the only way it could be satisfied is if Carthage stopped existing. And it appears as if the US has been trying very hard to do a Carthage on Russia. As long as it is there, it is a threat. And therefore has to be cut to size. The issue of China.
Right.
Of course, it's a big challenge which they ignored. I think 1 or 2 US scholars like John Marsheimer, one who was making noise all the time, pay attention to China, pay attention to China. Forget about Russia. Pay attention to China. And why? China was ignored is the same way that they ignored Japan because it was not white. And so the bigger danger is with another white power, Russia, rather than the Chinese. And give the Chinese credit for being very smart. It's with all the so-called provocations as they appear. The Chinese leadership has tried very hard to avoid giving these people reason for direct confrontation. And it's succeeding because the global reorientation that's taking place. The Chinese are in the lead. Yeah. The whole issue of unipolarity or singularity is gone. And the Americans and the West don't want to accept that they are no longer as powerful.
So you feel like they're in denial?
Of course, they're in denial. And this is not a new thing because people started writing some time ago. I wrote an article in 2005 saying they're on the decline. And why? When you lose credibility, you cannot be trusted. You can have all the guns and everything, but if nobody believes you, what are you talking about? And those are signs of things going haywire. So there is a crisis of the West. The crisis is more in the West than in other places. And then they project their own challenges to other people and then make the other people look as if they are the bad ones.
All right, and we also are going to look at how this then affects Kenya and what the escalation will mean for Kenya. But Honorable Farah Maalim, looking at the key players in this particular conflict, I just want to pick the voice and the perspective of the Iranians, and Ibrahim Raisi, of course, the Iranian leader, just the picture here. And what their stand is that Iran launched the attack over a suspected Israeli strike on its consulate in Syria on April 1st. Now, if the escalation is anything to go by, Kenya will be affected in a way or another. So what does this then mean to Kenya? Because,
you know, when Biden says Israel, if you choose to retaliate,
yes,
you're on your own.
Yes.
It's not because he cares about global peace. It's not because he cares about anything sensible, anything noble, anything good for the world. He knows he's going to lose the elections because the first thing that Iran will do is to close the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz. Once you close the Strait of Hormuz, 40% of the oil in the world doesn't come through. American industries are going to go to hell. Trump is going to shoot through the roof like hell in terms of popularity. And he will lose big time. He'll be the biggest loser. I mean, nobody I think except when Truman ran against somebody, FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, he ran somebody, some non-entity tried to run against him and ended up getting one state, I think, or no state.
Oh, yeah, that was 1936.
Yeah, somewhere around there. So he's doing it because he thinks he can survive through this. He's trying to merely postpone this until he comes in. Look, the Israelis demonized Saddam Hussein, talked about weapons of mass destruction. All those guys who were in State Department those days, Wolfowitz, and remember all those guys who were the people who are with the Bushes.
So he did not commit any crimes against humanity?
No. He did not have any weapons of mass destruction.
Okay.
There was nothing. WMD was never found. And that's the reason why the Americans went to war against Iraq. And the people who pushed for it that time, the Rumsfelds and all those people, but there was a very powerful Zionist clique within that. I'm sure you remember the names. I'm trying to remember all those names, yeah? And one of them ended up becoming the World Bank, President of the World Bank, Wolfowitz. You get my point? And they pushed and pushed and pushed as if the world will be a better world if Saddam Hussein is gotten rid of. All to bid for Israel, for the state of Israel. And they were destroyed. 1.5 million, what you call Iraqis, either died from direct, what you call confrontation or the aftermath, and the children died. Then they went to Libya, the second place to go to. Before that, they went to Afghanistan. You get my point? The Taliban were never exporting anything like an extremist Islamic version of governance or Sharia. They never fought outside their country. The only person who was with them was Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Laden was trained by the CIA.
Okay.
He was a product of the CIA and the Mossad. He was a creation of the CIA and Mossad. And what do you call the Saudi intelligence? Like Osama was a blue-eyed boy from a very wealthy family, the bin Laden family in Saudi Arabia. So that version of the radical, what do you call Islamic thing, was a creation of the Americans. They created it. The Americans created Al-Qaeda. The Americans created the Mujahideen Khalq. Let me just finish.
All right.
They created every, what do you call it? The Americans are the biggest supporters right now of Boko Haram and Al-Shabaab, for your information. I'm telling you. And he has information. I'm telling you. They are the biggest funders and supporters of that. So then, of course, they went to war with, what do you call it, Iraq. Iraq was destroyed. All because of a false Zionist initiated, what do you call, premise that time that he has a weapons of mass destruction. Then they went to Afghanistan and fought Afghanistan like hell. You remember? When Osama bin Laden did these things, instead of looking for Osama bin Laden, they went to look for the Taliban. Taliban is a nationalist body. The Americans used the Taliban to defeat the Russians, the collapse of the Soviet Union, or the Soviet, or communism or socialism that time. It started with the loss of the Russians when they went into Afghanistan.
They were tricked into it.
They were tricked into it. They went in there. The Americans created what they call Al-Qaeda and all those. They gave them the Stinger missiles.
All right.
They destroyed what they call the Russians, because, you know, the Taliban's nobody's ever gone into Afghanistan and come out of it as victorious. There are 3 countries you can never get out of as victorious. To go to them in a war, you look for the system, and he's very good at that. I'm talking about Kagwanja. He knows that information very well. Afghanistan, Chechen, and Somalia.
So you go in there, you'll never be victorious.
No. If the Americans go to Somalia, Mogadishu right now, they'll come out of it losers. So what happened? Let me just finish this.
Right.
They tried to destroy what do you call Afghanistan, and they did all the damage they could. They came back to Libya again. They destroyed the Libyan people and the African dream at the time. The African dream was destroyed. They tried to do the same things also in Syria. The Russians came to support Bashar al-Assad. You know what I mean? If it's not for the Russians, Bashar would have been gone. Ages gone. They created this ISIS that was fighting Bashar al-Assad. So basically, everything you see out there is a creation of the Mossad The Israeli, what do you call the Zionists, the global Zionist thinkers and everything else, and their money and the rest of it. And the Americans, the British, all these people are basically pawns also. They're part of that conspiracy. They do have their own strategy. So when Israel, now, if this escalates, the first victim will be the Strait of Hormuz. And by the way, between me and you, and this is, everybody sees it, there will be no Israel. If Iran decides today to wipe out Israel from the map of the world, the Americans can go and bomb with their nuclear bombs, what do you call Iran? But they have got 4,000 hypersonic ballistic missiles that will end up there in a matter of minutes. And they will do all the damage you can imagine in this world. And they don't care. Let me tell you one thing, because if we're going to end up like Iraq, if we're going to end up like Libya, if we're going to end up like Afghanistan, if we're going to end up like this, so be it. Let the world come to an end. So basically, these are the kind of things. You either come to an end progressively. So there's a certain dignity by all people.
Indeed.
Persians are people who had kingdoms and had civilizations 700 years, 7,000 years before there was anything called the US. US is only 200 years old.
Indeed. Let me hear from Nelson, because we appreciate history on this show today, because Kenyans understand where we have come from. But even as we're speaking, you do know what fuel means for Kenyans. Just when Ukraine and Russia happened, Kenyans, you would see the queues, that there was a lot of frustration, the high cost of living, and Kenya top imports, all right, and as far as Middle East is concerned, which include refined petroleum. We're looking at palm oil, wheat, packaged, medicaments and cars imported, mostly from, we're looking at China, United Arab Emirates, India, Malaysia, and Saudi Arabia are likely to be affected, according to this report, logistically. At the end of the day, fine, all this is happening out there, but how are we shielding Kenya? How do you expect that Kenya would shield itself? I mean, we went through what happened with Ukraine and Russia. Do you think, and Kenya Kwanza is just a few years in, are Kenyans ready for this? If they don't have a hand in, managing it, do we have some shield?
We don't have any shield because we don't have a bargaining chip.
Okay. We're extremely weak.
We are very weak. We are nonetheless
extremely weak.
But the Americans going to hell.
There is nothing that we can do, because, like you've heard Mheshimiwa say, when Iran decides to close 40% of the oil going to the parts of the world, including the West, the effect is going to be felt immediately.
Immediately?
Yes, because everywhere. And it's going to be gross. It won't be a Kenyan thing or a Ugandan thing. And of course, our politicians and the political class will have a reason to now say, those things have happened. But I know a mover of any economy is oil or energy.
So then we should be thinking about being self-sufficient as a country?
There was a time, maybe Mheshimiwa can enlighten me on this, there was a time they said there was oil in Turkana, maybe.
There's oil not only in Turkana, there's oil in Northeastern Province, there's oil in Turkana.
Because
the Bardera, what you call basin, comes right into Kenya. And then, of course, there's the issue of the offshore conflict with Somalia, which I think...
because if Kenya was having its own oil, for example, that is sufficient to run the economy, we will be less dependent on imported oil. And if the production cost goes down, the living cost will obviously go down. Because every industry today is using energy. We cannot ignore the fact that even though we are still discovering the oil, I don't know what is very difficult to spot this is oil here, so what do we do next from here? I don't know how that difficult is. I mean, I'm thinking as a layman.
Turkana issue had a lot of personal greed. I mean, does anybody have the exact, what do you call, picture of the Turkana issue?
Yeah. Maybe the panel can tell me.
When the Turkana, was it? That oil.
Yes.
When the news came, somebody made a very interesting comment. It was called Richard Leakey. He used to be the Koskei of his day.
Yeah.
The chief bureaucrat. He said, we always knew there was oil.
Okay.
But it was not economic
viable
to bring it up. Now they found a way of bringing it up without too much cost. That's what Vicky said. Yeah? So there was no discovery around there. What appears to have been the case, and this is part of the geopolitical game, the Chinese were busy discovering oil in the Sudan, in South Sudan.
Yeah.
And they were threatening to discover it in Uganda and Kenya. To stop these people from discovering the oil.
We discovered ours.
You discovered it first, then they cannot claim that. I think that's what happened.
So where is the oil?
So we always had the oil.
But eventually they were unable to exploit it, and in their own trading in London, they ended up giving it to the Chinese.
They were unable to exploit it.
Yeah, they were unable to learn it because they don't have the capacity. As they say, the West is in decline. Is not able to do the mega businesses of the group. But let's look at what we've been looking at.
But even before you go into that, I want to appreciate, because looking at self-sufficiency, we can't run away from that. Look at what happened with the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine. The cost of sea freight immediately went up to about $500, dollars on average per container. So it is important that we still on this discussion, not run away from the fact that Kenya needs to think, if this is going to be inevitable, how are we going to be self-sustained? Because even when the fuel prices went down, there was a joke and mockery, people saying, let's see if this will be sustainable. And don't tell us that it is the Iranian-Israel war that has made this oil shoot up again, to making high cost of living again very hard for Kenyans.
Now let's look at it this way. In 2002, when President Kibaki came to power, Kenya had emerged from a very difficult situation because we were locked in the West, completely locked in the West. And therefore we could not move. You cannot repair your roads, you cannot build new infrastructure, you cannot do anything. Education had collapsed almost because of structural adjustment programs, SAPs, and the economy was in a bad way. Mzee Moi had tried. He started moving the country to Eastern Europe and to other alternatives. Very quiet, but then, of course, under the circumstances, he was put under a lot of pressure. So, when Kibaki came to power, Kenyan began to think about the things that you are asking, you are raising here. What is the alternative beyond basically surrendering to fate? And this is when we came up with the idea of look east. And look east in a very broad way, that you don't abandon your friends in the West, but you don't serve their interest, you serve Kenyan interest. So I've made this point again and again, that the day Kenyans learn to serve their interests and identify their interest and go for their interest, that is when we rise beyond the crisis that we are facing ourselves. But the moment you kowtow and dance to the tunes of others just to look good and to look respectable and to be invited to places where you are schmoozing and all doing these things, then you are sacrificing the interest of Kenyans. This country survived during the time of Kibaki, soared up, because we became strategic and we focused on our interests. That's it. Today, the world is divided in a very clear way, and Kenyans, because we are on it, we have gone to school, thanks God, we can see where the world is headed. But then you have these people who, like the proverbial wife of Lot, is looking to Sodom and becoming salt. We are also going to be basically left there hanging. Because last year, we refused to attend in a decisive way the BRIC summit. The BRIC summit.
You said we refused?
No, we sent a kind of a token representation when we were expected to be on the driver's seat. Yes. Because South Africa is our ally. Nigeria has been our ally. But this time around, because I don't know what is driving our foreign policy, we decided just to go there, hang around and eat the cakes and the teas and take pictures. Now, what happened? In January this year, the world has changed. The largest consumer of oil is in the BRICS. The largest exporters of oil, Iran and Saudi Arabia, are in the BRICS. Yes. And Kenya is not in the BRICS. How can we solve our oil problem when you are not in the market? Now, you have to look at the trends of the world. Right. Now, if you look at the PricewaterhouseCoopers report on the future of the economy of the world, it's not Beijing. It is not. It's not about Iran. It is not what Russia is saying. What London is saying. By 2050, The first economy will be China, with 54 trillion economy. The second economy will be India, with $44 trillion economy. The third will be America, with $34 trillion economy. And the fourth will be Indonesia.
Indonesia.
The next will be Mexico. So in the current G7, the only country, in the current G7, the only country that will be in G7 is America.
US.
Is alone. The others are out. So the current BRICS, as they allege, China, India, that's the future of the G7.
Yeah.
And Kenya refused to join the BRICS. Are we strategic?
You know, and we also appreciate he's also a member of parliament.
Yes.
In this regard.
Yes. Let me tell you, you know, some of these things you get nostalgic about. When we were going east, when we decided, Kibaki decided we were going to the Chinese, I was just a deputy speaker in the National Assembly. He called me with Mudaura in his office, in OOP, and we sat across like that. And the late Kibaki told me, Farah, we want to go to the east. That's, I think, where the future of our country will be greatly served in certain areas. And we discussed. Of course, I listened. I listened. This man is one of the best economists the continent has ever had. And I saw the wisdom. And I saw the patriotism in the man. He wants to change things. And that's when our economy picked like hell. That whole Thika highway, Thika highway, everything that was done all over was cost us only 32 billion. Only 32 billion. The one from the airport, which now is the expressway, am I right?
Expressway, yes.
Expressway. We were given a bill of an engineer's estimate of 23 billion Kenya shillings. And Kibaki said that's too expensive. How much is it costing us now? 80 billion?
Yeah.
More than 80 billion.
It's costing us almost 4 times what it was going to cost us at the time. The problem is patriotism. You know, I was telling people in a function where we met the other day, there's a saying in my language that camels that are stolen by the owner can never be recovered.
Camels that are stolen by the owner can never be recovered.
So the owner is a thief.
The owner is a thief. He's stealing his own camels. The owners of a state like this is the administrators, the governors.
That's nice.
That's a good one.
The governors. Now, if theft starts at that level,
I'll tweet that.
If, you know, I was telling my brother Kagwanja the other day, we had 10 years in this country here of the Jubilee
Administration.
Yes.
When the primary objective of our CEO, national CEO, was to expand and develop on his family business.
Yes.
Period.
Patriotism.
Honorable Farah Malim.
And then you look at the richest families in the country. It's all people who have had an opportunity to run this country. That's why they say if there's going to be more wealth in politics, then why go into business?
No, there's no need.
Let's go into business.
Actually, right now we have a very serious problem because students are being discouraged from being students.
Yes.
And then let me explain just what he's saying. Let me just finish. Yeah. Professor is in the university.
Right.
I have a family members who are in the medical field. A good number. A few of us are outside medicine. My children, my sons, my daughter, my wife, my sister, all of them are doctors. My daughter was telling me a very worrying scenario. She told me, Dad, everybody who is specializing right now is from a prominent family. Because they're the only ones who can afford. the children, brilliant A students of the ordinary Kenyans, one cannot access medicine. The chances are very limited. But if you have a B standing, and you have the right what they call cluster, you have at least a B in one of the languages and B in English, in chemistry and biology, then of course you can easily go into any medical college because you're paying for it. People are paying for it. Universities have become commercial centers. They have become commercial centers. So the children, the brilliant children, ordinary Kenyan children, are not getting this opportunity. With a straight A, still you're not guaranteed to go into medicine.
No. Yeah.
But with the B standing, with money, if you have money, there you are.
Yes.
So we're creating, progressively and continuously creating nobility structure. The Brits, you know, when Charles Jonjo used to put on the three-piece suit, and then with the what do you call that? The clock in the what? The clock in the jacket. The clock in the jacket, and also be, you know, walking his dog. A breed that I don't even know. We don't have names.
Okay.
For us, dogs are just dogs in Somali community. We don't have any. We don't have Doberman and Shepherd and all the
Chihuahuas.
And Chihuahuas. We don't have that. You get my point?
Yes.
I think we started going wrong from a very early stage. So what Kagwanja is saying is that we have to have a leadership that says, where is my interest?
Okay.
By the way, with all their faults, Moi was a lot better in many ways. He went to Iran one time. I don't know if you remember. When the West was too hard on us, he went to Iran. And right now, that's what we should have been doing. We should be getting concessionary oil from these countries, which can be as good as just free.
Okay.
Because we don't look like we are locked up in somebody. You see, the moment something happens and Biden is coming or Netanyahu is coming, we have our own people who must say something, tweet, and look like they're in good books with that. Now that's not right. That will not
sustainability.
Yeah. Nelson, because what I'm thinking is the president just the other day was also at Guinea-Bissau. Yes?
Yes.
And what he has been praised for, you know, is the fact that he is trying his best to be in good books with other countries.
He's trying to be a good Pan-African.
I might not use that word myself, but
he came out very well, by the way, in those conferences. You remember when he was engaging
he's selling Kenya.
In fact, him together with the ICT are working on another, African togetherness kind of convention, which I will speak on. But Honorable Maalim is saying we also need to look at our interests.
Yeah.
And this far, do you think not just the Kenya Kwanza administration, but the governments that have been, are we looking at Kenya's interests to begin with?
I think that we are not.
Even in the heart of conflicts?
Yes, because we can't be having a government every 5 years. There's a new agenda. When a new government comes in, that agenda goes away. We begin a new agenda.
Is our political style?
I think so. We have short memory. Kenyans have a very short memory. And we seem not to understand the essentials of development. Because if Chinese did not know what they want, they won't be in Africa today. Today, every African country is a Chinese project being done by Chinese.
Is that accurate, gentlemen? Every African country?
Yes.
Not just every African. Every country in the world.
There's a Chinese company supported by the Chinese government.
Yes. Now,
go to Brazil, go to Colombia, go to Venezuela.
Okay.
That's it.
Go to anywhere in the world.
So the thing is,
go to Italy.
Right. So what do we want as Africans, or rather Kenyans? What do we want? We have not yet identified. And I like what Professor Lumumba said one day, that we are on the table. Either we are part of the food.
As a menu, part of the menu.
Part of the menu.
Yes.
And not the people who are eating.
We're
on the menu.
You're either a rebel.
We're on the table, yes.
We just celebrated 60 years.
Yes. Now, let's look
as
at
a country.
Yeah, the problem we have, I mean, let's start with where Kenya really made a mark on the African continent. In the 60s, we decided who we are. And we identified our interests.
Yes.
Nyerere went to his Ujamaa. Tanzania, Uganda went to its Common Man's Charter. The others went socialist. We decided that we are going to go to a free market. And we are going to build a country based on the freedoms. And that is what sessional paper number 10 of 1965 was about. It was about deciding ourselves, who we are, and deciding where we are going. And that is how the Boyas of this world, the Kibakis of this world guided us through the Cold War. Rather than going down, we went up with only 18% of our land as arable. The rest is described as either arid or semi-arid. Only 18% is rain-fed. The rest is basically struggle. Yet, we were able to become the largest economy in this region. Why? Because we identified who we are and where we are headed as a people and put it in writing. Now, when Kibaki came to power, we started by saying we are not into poverty alleviation and all this nonsense. We are into wealth creation. So we start economic recovery and we create wealth and make our people wealthy and make our country great. That's what we decided. And therefore we came with Vision 2030. And Vision 2030 defined who we are. We are going to be a middle class, a middle level economy, headed to high level economy. But this is where by 2030 we should be there. By 2063, we will be top with Africa. This agenda 2063, we will be on top of that agenda because we will have achieved everything. But then we started this yo-yoing. Here, it is a business of egos. Every time you come, you want to have your own agenda. 5 pillars, 10 pillars, 30 pillars. You are the one who choose how many pillars this country is going to have. Then you come again, you are going to not to start from up, you're going to start from the bottom. It's like you are constructing a new Kenya. Meaning, we start to shoot ourselves on the foot. Yeah. Rather than build
There's no progression.
So let me then contrast that with what has happened. By 1980, China was one of the poorest countries in the world. Only 2 countries in Africa, were poorer by GDP than China. In other words, if China was an African country, it would have ranked number 3 from the bottom. Kenya was way, way, way ahead of China.
Those above Singapore, above Malaysia, above Hong Kong.
So, China decided to put its act together.
Okay.
Deng Xiaoping, their chairman that time, sat down and told the Chinese, we'll have to do this and this and this, and these are the interests. He debated his own people, gave them what we call the opening up and reform agenda. What has happened? By 2020, China is one of the richest economy, the second richest economy. They are now building our railways, they are helping us to build our roads, and they are giving us loan for everything. Why? Because the leadership put its act together. China is the same China of the 1940s. It has not changed. China is the same China in terms of its resources, its geography, its population. It's the same China.
All right.
But the leadership decided to change its mind. Here in Kenya, our leadership has refused to change its mind and give us a direction that is going to make us as powerful as China. Full stop.
And I want to find out
just a little bit there.
Yes, yes.
Deng Xiaoping was a very smart fellow. And I think he emphasized the Chinese should and must produce what they need, not import. And they have a very big market.
Yep.
So imagine if you are producing bicycles for 500 million people, and we don't import cars, or motorcycles. So feed the domestic market first.
All right.
Yep.
And the surplus you can sell to somebody else.
And what we're looking at, I want to take a very short breather, Mheshimiwa. I will come back, because what we're seeing even on the screen is the AUC chair race. Fact remains that an African Union Commission chairperson election will be held in February 2025 to choose the 5th commission chair to succeed the incumbent, now chairperson, Musa Faki. Will Kenya, and is Kenya properly positioned in as far as this race is concerned? We'll come back with that conversation, because remember, another candidate just came in from Djibouti. Some analysts saying it's a very big threat. What is the calendar like in as far as the calendar events? What is expected to happen? Kenyans need to know. A Djibouti factor happened in 2017 with Amina Mohammed, but will it be a hindrance this year? Also, the question of, are we setting poor precedents if politically Kenya would just be then planning to get rid of a strong opposition? Would that be a good picture to paint to the rest of the globe? We take a very short breather.